So, welcome back. Yes, I finally managed to unlock the F-15J, which is the Japanese one. So I didn't go for the American one because I don't know, like if you go for an American plane, you're just always limited to one side, right? Same with the Russian plane, but with how matches, tend to sort of, like how the meta shifts and stuff like that through a patch, it's a good idea to have a plane that can be flown on both sides, if that makes sense. And Japan is one of those nations that can kind of switch sides whenever it, in certain situations. So, kind of like Sweden and France as well in that sense, and Italy. However, for all intents and purposes, the F-15J is, as far as I know, the same as the F-15A, the American one, except I think it's like a little bit, it's like 300 kilos heavier or something like that, which, I don't know how much of a role that plays, but, I mean, the thing's still pretty damn good. You also get AAM-3 missiles, which are very similar to AIM-9Ms, I believe. They have the smokeless motor, so they're invisible basically, which is obviously always good for sim. I don't know exactly what the difference is between them, like if there's a difference in range or whatever. I just haven't played with them enough yet. But they pull 40G, so they pull a little bit tighter than the AIM-9Ms. You can use them at a little bit more close range or whatever, and it's not a world of difference to the AIM-9M, because the main thing about those missiles is the fact that they're invisible and they have that IRCCM thing, the countermeasure thing or whatever, with the INS seeker. So very hard missile to flare, very hard missile to see in general. I mean, it's borderline impossible in certain situations. Having said that though, as you can see in the gameplay here, I just merged with the MiG-23 up at 31,000 feet, I think it was. Went to the vertical, got up to 40,000 feet, and I think we had about 6 miles of separation by the time I got the nose round. So I think, honestly, I think that's the highest I've ever merged in this game. I'm going to be honest, like it's the highest I've ever had like a dogfight at 31,000 feet. I think that tops it. But the reason I'm up here in the first place is because I think altitude is a very, very important part of this plane. You can really notice it when you fly it, because we all know from playing American props and whatever, their strength is up at altitude. That's where that's where generally where their engines are tuned to work. It's what they're optimized for. And you really notice it with the F-15. I haven't really flown the F-16C yet, because I've heard it has the same engine. Actually, no, I think the F-15J has the same engine as the F-16A, as far as I know. But it doesn't matter. I mean, stuff like the aerodynamics and everything like that, you can just tell the thing is designed to fly above 20,000 feet, and it really does perform above 20,000 feet as well. The climb rate is insane. The energy retention is absolutely insane. The energy retention is pretty good down at low altitude as well, but you really notice it with your top speed. This thing does, it is thrust limited down on the deck, not airframe limited like most planes, like most 4th gens. Which basically means that eventually the engines just run out of puff. You're not going to redline it on the deck. I think you max out at around 750 knots or something like that, and it just won't. That's basically when it stops accelerating. Now I think it starts redlining above somewhere above 800 knots, and I've been up to 840 without it ripping yet. So probably slightly above then is actually the actual rip speed. But if you can see in the clips here, I'm flying up at 37,000 feet right now. I've just launched a Sparrow at like, I don't know, 25 miles or something like that against the MiG-29. Now, when it comes to the Sparrow versus the R-27, also when I say R-27 in this video, I'm specifically talking about the ER, the extended range version. Obviously, the R-27 is better than the Sparrow, I think in pretty much every sense. I think they have the same range, but it's, it's like twice as fast, it feels like. So, in any situation, if you're flying down on the deck, or down at low altitude or whatever, and you both like fire off at each other at, I don't know, 10 miles at the same time, the ER is obviously going to win every single time. So what you have to do is, if you want to use your Sparrows on the F-16, on the F-15, is you have to sort of give yourself an advantage, right? Because in a neutral situation, the R-27 is going to win every time. If you're up at 30,000 feet and the enemy is down at sea level, basically, if you both fire off your missiles at the same time, your Sparrow is going to reach him before his R-27. It's just because of the altitude, because obviously we know that air density gets lower the higher up you go, which means missiles fly further and they also fly faster. So that's something very important that you have to play with the F-15, and that's why in real life, planes generally tend to fly as high as they can when it comes to BBR fighting and stuff, just because it means their missiles are going to fly further. And you can tell this is exactly what the F-15 was designed to do in terms of its performance. So it's really good at climbing, it's really good at, I think it's famous for having a 1-to-1 cross to weight ratio as well, which basically means it can accelerate going upwards. Now it can't do that with a full load of weapons and fuel, of course, but essentially the thing is just very, very good at climbing. When it comes to like stuff like energy retention as well, I mean, it just outperforms the flanker at altitude in like every sense. I mean, when you're at 30,000 feet and you're going, say, Mach 1.5 or something, you can basically do like a full U-turn, right? Pull back on the stick, you know, obviously in a flat turn, you roll to the side, fall back on the stick, make a U-turn, and the thing only goes down to like Mach 1.3 or something like that from 1.5. So its energy retention really is something to behold up at altitude, and that's why I think once we get AMRAAMs, and obviously it kind of depends how Gaijin implement AMRAAMs, how good they're going to be, how reliable, whatever. But let's just, I don't know, take the DCS AMRAAMs for example, right? The F-15 is going to be really, really, really dangerous once they get at it. Just the ability to fly fast and sort of, you know, you fire off at 30,000 feet and then you lose altitude, you go back down to 20,000, then you climb back up to 30,000 for round 2 or whatever. It can do that a lot better than the flanker can, and a lot better than the MiG-29 can, and that's kind of just what I'm trying to say. When it comes to the radar, the radar, I don't think it's finished. It's missing the TWS mode, which I'm pretty sure the F-15 should have, because obviously it gets AMRAAMs at some point. So I don't know if the F-15A has TWS, but the F-16C should definitely have TWS as far as I know. And the F-15J is basically an F-15C, so I'm not sure why it's not here. I'm sure, I think what it is, obviously the devs just kind of ran out of time before the patch was due to release, so I think that's why a lot of things are kind of the way they are right now. I mean, radars were kind of buggy. Actually, a patch came out today kind of fixing the fact that they locked onto chaff and whatever, so the problem the radar has is it's not really the fact that it doesn't really pick stuff up. It's essentially the same radar that the early F-16s have. So it has like decent notch gates and stuff like that. Up at high altitude, you know, notching is kind of like impossible anyway unless you use chaff. But it's not ideal. I think the radar is going to get upgraded, and then once we do get the radar upgrade and we get the TWS and stuff like that, I think this plane is going to sort of come into its own a little bit more. But you do get the good RWR, which shows you the range and what is actually locking you up, which like I said in the last video, it does wonders for your situational awareness, and it really does help prioritize targets, especially when you're in BVR and you're up at high altitude and everyone can see you because you're conning, and you have to maintain situational awareness in order to, you know, not have anyone sneak up on you and stuff. So now down on the deck, like I said earlier, this thing does have pretty good energy retention. It's a little bit slow on the deck, but it does have good energy retention against anything Russian. So the flanker, the MiG-29, you're basically gonna win every dogfight if you know what you're doing. Just stick to the rate fight. I mean, you can even honestly, you can even try and one-circle some MiG-29s and some flankers in certain situations. The one-circle performance on the F-15 really isn't that big of an issue. I will say, if you are planning the dogfight, try and stay below... I wouldn't dogfight over 30 minutes of fuel, if I'm being honest. Ideally, you want to be down at 20 minutes, because this thing does carry a lot of fuel, kind of like the flanker, and the fuel load really does make a difference in terms of weight, is just what I'm trying to say. Internal fuel, I think this thing takes about 42 minutes or something like that, and you get 3 external drop pods that you can take as well, which I think they're like 12 minutes each, so that equates to like 36 or 37 minutes or something like that. I would honestly recommend taking 30 minutes of internal fuel and then just taking at least 1 or 2 drop pods depending on what you want to kind of do, you know, the external fuel tanks, and then you can do your BVR stuff with the fuel tanks attached, and then when you get close into BVM, you can just drop the tanks, and you know, you're in dogfight mode, you're nice and light. Maybe instead of 30 minutes internal, you can also kind of maybe go for 20 minutes. That's something I wanted to try, but I haven't actually like done that yet. You just need to be careful, because down on the deck, the F-15 does like to go through its fuel load quite fast. Also, down on the deck is very dangerous right now, just because of the fact that the J39 Gripen exists. Yes. If you fly the F-15J, which means if you fly Japan, because of the way the matchmaking is in Sim right now, if you fly Japan, there isn't a single matchup where you are on the same side as Sweden, which basically means every single match you are going to run into J39s. Now, the J39, it's probably not going to stay like the way it is right now. However, right now, as of recording this on Friday, I think yesterday, so on Thursday, there's a patch that came in that increased the low speed thrust at sea level by like I don't know, like 1,500 kilograms or whatever it was. So it's the thing's impossible. It rates. I mean, it rates at like 23.5 degrees of second right now at 400 knots on minimum fuel. Sky King tested it, and it's insane. I mean, 23.5 degrees a second on low fuel. That's F-16 territory. You know what I mean? And it's a delta wing. You know what I mean? It's insane. The 1 second performance is obviously going to be a lot better than the F-15. I just think this is probably the main. I mean, this is the main problem that the F-15 is facing right now. Is that damn little weasel of an aircraft. I haven't flown it yet, but I have bought enough of them, and you cannot. I mean, you really do struggle to outrate them. I think the F-15 might barely be able to just about outrate it in like a flat turn on the deck or whatever, right? But you go into a vertical, you're dead, right? You do anything at high altitude where, you know, even I know the Gripen doesn't get that much speed, but Delta Wings doesn't have that much engine power at altitude. But Delta Wings in general are just very good at altitude, just because generally if you're maneuvering, you're always kind of slow, and Delta Wings handle so much better at slow speed. So it's just a very dangerous plane in general. I know I said earlier the F-15 is quite good at altitude, but you know, if the thing gets inside your turn circle at any altitude, there's not going to be a lot you can do from that position, especially against a Delta Wing, and you really don't want that thing inside your turn circle, too much separation, because it has 9Ms, right? If you do run into a Gripen up at altitude, obviously he doesn't really have any radar missiles worth worrying about, so I do think you are safer up high in the sky, so to speak, but just when you're on the deck and you run into one of these things, and the person flying it kind of like somewhat knows how to fly it as well, like they somewhat know what they're doing, things are really not looking good for you. That's just what I'm trying to say. And then the fact that it has unlimited flares and whatever like that, and a really low heat signature from the engine, yeah, I don't know. I think it's, like I said, I think it's probably going to get nerfed at some point in the future, just because, you know, it's the flavour of the month plane or whatever, and this is just how things are in War Thunder. But at the moment, it is pretty damn, I don't want to say impossible, but it's getting close to deal with. My next video hopefully will be on the Gripen, and I'll save some of my ranting for that video. But oh man, I despise this thing right now, I'm gonna be honest. But aside from the Gripen, and if you're on the US team with this thing, fighting the Russian flankers and the MiG-29s, and you play it like an F-16, you fly low, you hug the deck all the time, you don't really have that much to worry about. So I don't, in no way do I want to make the impression that this is a bad aircraft or anything. No, not at all. It's just the Gripen is the problem right now. But anything that the Russians have, whether that be a flanker, a Fulcrum, or a MiG-23, what was it called, the Flogger or something, you're going to out-dogfight them. If you fly close to the ground, the R-27 is not really going to be a problem anyway. You have like 240 flares on board, so if they fire an R-73, you just tap that button as fast as you can, right? I've rebound my flare button since the last patch to something that's a little bit more comfortable, that I can just mash a little bit quicker as well, so it'll be easy for me to grab. So the R-73s in general just they don't have the flare resistance to warrant really being that much of a threat in BFM. If it's anything kind of like side aspect, you know, if you relatively keep your noise pointed at the enemy or whatever, they're not gonna, the R-73 is not gonna really be that much of a problem for you if you have 240 flares on board like the F-15 does. So yeah, I think the Russians are probably in a worse spot right now. I mean, the flanker doesn't stand a chance against the Gripen with the unlimited flares and everything like that, so yeah, I don't know. You're definitely in a much better boat there. Plus you get the invisible missiles, which just make sneaking up on the Gripen so much easier. You get the RWR, you don't even need to have the radar on in a lot of cases, just by having that RWR. So yeah, in no way is this a bad plane. However, that's all the footage I have. Thank you very much for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video, and hopefully my next video will be on the Gripen. Hopefully I'll get it done in a week. I'm trying to get a video out every, once a week now, so yeah. Anyway, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.